Hello everyone, Funky Blood here, and sorry for this new, uh, I don't know, shot composition. It's just that it's very sunny today, and if I had this camera like right here, the windows would be shining so much that it would be so hard to see me even. So I just put it here, and I guess that's how we're gonna do this. 2022 is almost over. How sad is that? I love this number. It's almost as iconic as the year 2000, 2002, 2010, 2011, 2015. But I guess we have to move past it. I wish this number kept going forever, but sadly it won't. And there will be more albums next year. I don't know where I'm going with this. I heard a lot of albums this year, and I want to talk about them for a minute or two each. Some of these, most of these actually, are pretty well known, and some of these are a bit more obscure. I write reviews a lot, but talking about these albums, I think can add a different angle to my opinions. So I made this tier list template with a lot of albums I heard this year, from this year, and we're gonna go through each and every one of them and place them somewhere on this list. Also, I haven't heard this album and this album and this album, as well as this album. Also this album, as well as this album, as well as this. Also that one. I might hear them soon. These 6 tiers don't really signify my scores on these albums as much they signify my recommendation to you as to which you should hear first and which you should hear last. Oh yeah, also I'm not gonna talk about everything I heard this year because there were some albums I don't feel like coming back to or talking about really, like that SOS Mula and OTAL BZ collaboration EP or the new Shinedown album. I think I'm never gonna hear them again. And like with the Wet Leg album, I will talk about it, but very briefly because I heard it very early in the year, and I didn't hear it again before this recording, and I don't feel like doing that because from what I remember it was pretty good, but not super standout, and it was fine overall. And also remember, this is all my opinion. You can love or hate any of these. I'm just gonna put these albums wherever I want to show in this video you guys what I would recommend the most and the least. Also follow me on Album of the Year. I will put the link for my account down below, and you can see all of my scores and reviews of every album I scored and reviewed, which you might be interested in slightly. It has like 600 scores. So we're gonna start off with Boris's W. I'm not that big of a Boris fan in that I haven't heard even a third of the catalog, but even then I think this album is pretty mediocre and not bad, but it's pretty uninspired, and I didn't have that great of an experience listening to it, so I'm gonna give it the C tier. and move on with my life. Next is Pusha T's It's Almost Dry. I think that's what it's called. This album is great. It's almost as great as Daytona. Pusha T really brings back his iconic flow, writes some of his best songs ever, and it's very well produced as well. And it might be a bit too samey in places, but I think without a doubt it's one of the best rap albums of the year, regardless. And I'm going to give it a D tier. The next is The Weeknd's Dawn FM. This album is really great, and I think this is one of the most iconic albums of the year, honestly. And not only because it has some of the biggest songs of the year, but also Abel's successful transformation into this synth pop and 80s inspired dance pop is really awe-inspiring and instantly recognizable at this point. But yeah, the concept is really strong, the songs are really well produced, and though it kind of sort of falls apart by the end, the closer is really great, and basically every album and basically every song before the Lil Wayne collab is great, straight up great. And I'm also gonna give it the A tier. The next is Wormrot's Hiss. This was a great album as well. It took a conceptual and kind of grand approach to grindcore. I gave it about an 80 out of 100, but I think with time I'm going to get more and more out of it. And it is really, really energizing and one of the best loud rock albums of the year, without a doubt. A tier. Oh, the next is Cave War. This is one of my favorite albums of all time. There are so many bangers and so many great performances all over this album. I am just happy that it exists. And the social commentary on top of it is really top tier as well. Yeah, the Viagra Boys just knocked it out of the park on this one, and I'm going to give it a DS tier. Also, ADD is a banger. It really is. Oh god, these next few albums are a doozy. They are doozies. The new Black Eyed Peas album. It's horrendous. I don't even want to remember it. There were so many awful and horrible. Ugh, 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 ugh. The holy fucking fuck. Your body is upset. That is so stupid. I don't even. What is there to say? This is bad. They put the least amount of effort into writing coherent songs imaginable. It feels dumbed down beyond words even. And I'm going to give it the F tier. Okay, this next album is just as bad. Not gonna lie. The new Kid Rock album is bad. He talks about, being alt-right and being based and all that, but then he throws in like 10 soulful country songs that are the most cringe shit ever, even though, the actual rap rock songs are just as cringe. I don't even know what I'm talking about. This album is bad, and it's one of the worst albums I've ever heard. And I'm also gonna give it the F tier. The new Pluto album is also fucking bad. Uh, God, if you don't know what Pluto is, it's like some Bandcamp band you don't have to know at all, to be honest. And Lunaris is their debut album, I guess, and it's also one of the worst things I've heard all year. The production and the lyrics and the vocal performances are some of the most tone deaf, bad, and mind-boggling elements of music I've heard all year, to be honest. I can't even describe it. The lyrics are so tone deaf and so beyond fixing that this album is just God. What the fuck? I don't know. If you want to hear it, or at least some of it, it's on Spotify, but I wouldn't recommend it at all. It's honestly horrible, and I'm going to give it the F tier as well. The next, it's called Silent, and it's by some South American celebrity, internet celebrity, I guess. It's kind of famous. This album is poorly recorded and poorly produced and kind of full of itself. I didn't hate every single second of it, but even at its best, it's mediocre. So I'm going to give it an F as well.
Are you kidding with me? Okay, no problem.
Okay, now we're gonna get onto the albums I thought were just slightly better. This new Sos Mula collaboration album was phoned in as hell, and the beats didn't go
hard.
His flows were just mediocre, and it was kind of annoying somehow at the same time. And listen, I like City Morgue. I gave their 2019 album, I think, a 7 out of 10. But this was kind of awful, but just mediocre as well. I don't even know what to say about it. I'm going to give it the D tier. At least it's better than the OTL Busy collaboration EP. Yeah, that's for sure. The new Deity Crew mixtape that's self-titled was also kind of ridiculous, but also pretty bad. I heard it very early in the year, but I still remember that I was disappointed because it was pretty tongue-in-cheek and pretty adventurous somewhat, but it was such a nothing burger and it wasn't even funny that I just disliked it, and I came back to it like 9 months later and I gave it like 20 points less. I don't know. At least it's not as bad as the first album that had a pink cover that I talked about earlier. So I'm gonna give it the D tier. The D tier. The new Post Malone album is okay. I mean bad. I mean whatever. Everyone universally agrees that it was produced like shit and overproduced and all that. And yes, he does pour his heart out on that album, but sadly, with how it sounds, it's very, very intolerable. There are a lot of themes of drug abuse and mental health and all that, and I respect it for that, but I will never really return to it because I still remember how bad it sounds. On his next album, I guess he should hire better producers. This album, I guess, is like a stepping stone towards something much better, but as a piece of entertainment, it's pretty bad. And I'm going to give it the D tier as well. The new Superorganism album is mediocre. Apparently, they had like a great album in 2018. I haven't heard it yet, but beyond that, this follow-up album is pretty thrown together. And even by standards of indie pop, it's so all over the place, it's barely coherent. I guess it's all in good fun and all that, but it's pretty whack. Yeah. I'm going to give it the City. Speaking of whack, this YG album is pretty okay. I know people are saying it's his worst. It might be. I haven't heard anything else from him besides Still Brazy, which is a masterpiece. Still, there are some tunes I enjoy on this album, so it's not like one of the worst albums I've heard this year, but it's probably one of the most disappointing because, you know, YG could do a lot better than this album would lead you to believe. But sadly, he has shown to be on a losing streak pretty much for 6 years now, and this album is as much of a dud as possible. I'm going to give it the C tier as well. It was mediocre. The new 1975 album is pretty good. I know that Bad Taste in Music's community pretty much outright rejected it, and people say it's pretty tasteless, pretty poorly written, but after hearing it the second time, I can see that. Also, I think it's kind of earnest and pretty solid as an album. I wouldn't say it's great, really. I wouldn't say it's bad either. It kind of hangs in this area where I can kind of respect it, but I wouldn't say I would return to it all that much. And I'm going to give it the C tier as well. The last 10 albums I talked about were all pretty much not that good. Why did I put this list like this? God damn it. At least this OC's album is great. Somewhat. I haven't heard all that much from them. I should actually. I forget what this album is called. But this new Skull album is pretty punky, it's pretty lo-fi, it's pretty energetic. It might not be, you know, the most original or well put together album in the world, but it's pretty memorable and pretty fun again, and it's like 20-30 minutes long, so I would kind of recommend it, but you know, it's not one of the best albums of the year or anything, and I'm going to give it the B tier. This comeback Porcupine 3 album, it's alright. I know there's some hype behind this album in that it's their first album in 13 years, but honestly I think it's about as good as The Incident. This album is pretty stretched out. I think I liked half of the album, including the bonus songs, but the rest was like 4 out of 10s and 5 out of 10s. Rat's Return is pretty bad though. I would recommend it if you want know, some background music, some long prog rock background music. But, as a piece of entertainment, it's kind of whatever, in my opinion. And I'm going to give it the C tier. This new Megadeth album was mediocre as well, but also sounded like us. The lyrical topics were bad, and the instrumentals were bad. Kudos to them for, sticking to their sound and everything, but they should just kind of give it up at this point. They made like 16 albums now, and like 6 of them were good. And that was like 30 years ago, or 20, or like 15 years ago, I guess. I heard all of them this year, and this one was on the lower side of Megadeth's entire catalog for me, and I gave it like a 4 out of 10, and I wouldn't really recommend it, as I think it's boilerplate thrash metal in 2022, and I would give it the D tier. Behemoth are a Polish band, yay! I love Poland, woohoo! Although they are kind of right wing. Boo, boo! We hate we hate right wing people on the internet, and ain't that right, guys? Whatever. This album is pretty good, and I enjoyed it. I know Behemoth is kind of steeped in controversy as of late, and people might overlook this album as just a thing that happened that wasn't that important, but as a piece of occult music, it kind of succeeds at what it's trying to do, and it was kind of lazily put together, and I didn't think every track was great, and I gave it like a 69 out of 10 out of 100, but I think there is something to this album. The performances on it gripped me, and I had a good time with it, to be honest. And I'm going to give it, you know what, I'll give it the B tier, bordering on C tier, because it's honestly like not even as good as the OC's album, but it's pretty entertaining, and I would say I recommend it, even though I didn't give it the best score ever. Okay, this Black Keys album is mediocre as hell. It's kind of passionate at points, but
The writing.
it's beyond soulless, and I can't even remember a single thing about it. But again, it's not bad. It's just very boring and very whatever. So I'm gonna give it a C. So I'm gonna give it so I'm going to give it so I'm going to put it in C tier and move on. This new Kendrick Lamar album is pretty good. There, I said it. What a hot take, I know. Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers represents Kendrick's return as a hip-hop icon and a force in modern music that everyone agrees is great. And this album is a bit too poppy for its own good, but it's written very well. The features are kind of a mixed bag, but the ones that go off do go off, and it has pretty fantastic beats all throughout. And although it's okay at points, I still think it's one of the best rap albums of the year. And It's certainly better than them. That's for sure. And I'm going to give it the A tier. This Nicholas Craven album is pretty good. It's a producer-centered hip hop album with some MCs that you might have not even heard of, but I remember it being pretty good. I think it still holds up, and I will give it the B tier. I might as well talk about the Kenny Beats debut album, because it has basically the same concept, and I like it about the same. This one is much more of an instrumental hip hop album, but it still is very well assembled. The features are great, and it's great to do homework too. And I'm going to give it the B tier as well. Oh god. This Georgie album was pretty bad. Glimpse of Us is one of his best songs, and I think the second song is pretty good. The second and third songs are pretty great as well, but beyond that, it's just straight garbage, and it's not that good, to be honest. And I'm going to put it in the D tier. Also, it's like 2 discs and 24 minutes long, which is a complete joke. It was horrible how he went about assembling this album, to be honest. Ants from Up There, I think that's what it's called, is one of the best albums of all time, one of the best albums of this year. All that jazz, rock. Yeah, everyone agrees that this album is terrific and all that, and I agree, this album is one of the best albums of all time, because the performances are S plus tier, the writing is very engaging, and it's great. It's great. I'm not as passionate about it as the Viagra Boys album, but I'm going to put it in the S tier as well. Okay, the new Blady and Echo 2K album is good. Very good, in fact. It presents such a potent sense of bliss that track after track after track, I was feeling all of it. Blade and Echo 2K have a great chemistry, and the beats on this album are freaking great. It deserves its high place in this tier list, and I'm going to give it the A tier. I might as well talk about the new Blady album as well. Blade is a pretty charismatic singer
and songwriter.
Especially since he actually sounds like he wants to make music. And I agree with Fantano, this album is like a 7 out of 10. I'm going to put it in B tier. Okay, this next one. It's a pretty hyped up release, and for a good reason. This new Denzel Curry album is one of his most mature albums overall, and it features some of his best songs as well. You know, like X-Wing, Walking, that T-Pain collaboration. Maybe it sounds a bit casual and, you know, not super exciting, but I would say it's very, very solid. And this sense of finding inner peace is really compelling. This album is great. It's great. And Denzel continues to bring his A game on this album, so that's why I'm going to put it in the A tier. This Asian Glow and Weather Day collaboration is pretty good. It mixes bedroom pop and lo-fi shoegaze in a way that actually works, and I have really no complaints with it. It might be a bit too forgettable, somewhat, but the chemistry they have is really strong, and I would put it in the 80. Yeah, this new Logic album is kind of weird. Vinyl Days is apparently his last album with Def Jam Records, and as a second final album, because the 2020 album was apparently was supposed to be his last album ever, but whatever. It might be a bit too up its own ass, to be honest, so I'm not in love with it, really. But the beats on this album are actually great, and Logic does have a grasp on what makes a great verse and a great song. It's like 30 songs long, and I liked about a half of it. Also, the La Donda track and the Fantano interlude are both pretty funny, and I would put Vinyl Days in B tier. Hellfire, more like fire. Ha 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 ha. Ha 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 ha. Yeah, this Black Midi album is just as good as the Black Country New Road album. It's very conceptual, very theatrical, and you can't really understand it on the first listen, but it's very well put together and very well written and performed. Although some people find it pretentious and meaningless, there is a story happening and there are characters, and although I wouldn't say most songs work outside the context of the album, I would say this album is a great experience that people can shut up about for a reason. And I would put it in the S tier. This new Hot Chip album is pretty good. It features a bunch of conceptual dance pop songs and a bunch of just alright tunes. I loved a few songs from it, and I was indifferent to the rest of it, but I would say I would still recommend it because it is pretty charming, and the best songs on this album are pretty memorable and maybe even some of the best of the year. I'm just saying. And I would put it in B tier. The New Garden album. Yes, there was a New Garden album. Is pretty good as well. It is very punky and kind of lo-fi, and the energy the Garden brings on this album is really manic. Admittedly, it didn't make that big of a splash this year as much as their previous albums, but I would say this album is pretty sticky, pretty entertaining, and pretty terrific, and I would put it in B tier. Speaking of sticky, this Dev's Dynamic Shroud album called Dark Life is one of the craziest things ever. Just not even music, just ever. Just I think it's a duo behind the Dev's Dynamic Shroud, and what they came up with on this album is awe-inspiring to its core. and some of the songs from it, I have no idea how they even made it, how they even made them, but they are really some of the craziest things ever. It like combines vaporwave with R&B and a bunch of other genres. I can't even describe it. I found some songs in the second half to be a bit too samey and slow for me, so I'm not super in love with it, but I am in love with it for sure. And I would put it in the A tier. This Big Thief album is one of the best rock albums I've ever heard, and one of the best country albums I've ever heard. And Adrienne, I think it's her, it's the main vocalist's name, has a great voice, and basically every lyric on this album hits like a brick, as well as the tunes. The tunes steal the show as well. It might be a bit hard to listen to all of it for 80 minutes straight, but it is worth it. And basically every song, and there are like 20 songs, is a highlight. And I would put it in the S tier. This Earl Sweatshirt album was alright. Oh, sorry. I liked some rap songs. But this album was pretty half-hearted and not that great. It was pretty creative and pretty well produced. I'll give it that. And it is like worth at least a listen, since it's not too long and not that bad of a listen, but it's not super entertaining and it's pretty whatever. And I would put it in the C tier. Speaking of whatever, the new Big Crit album. My god, did he draw the ball on this album? It's so bad. No, wait, no. It's not super bad. It's super mediocre. The sounds that Big Crit goes for on this album are really not great for him, and this album results in some of the middest songs of the year. And the concept of it was okay, but love songs in hip hop and soul, that's like the MO concept since the beginning of music even. So trying to make an album about it, you have to be like at least somewhat creative, but Big Crit wasn't really creative on this album, so it resulted in a bunch of bullshit beats, a bunch of bullshit verses, and a bunch of crappy songs overall. And I would put it in the D tier. I wouldn't recommend it at all. Though what I would recommend is the first Kralles album of this year. It's not on Spotify because they left the label or something, but with how Kralles went about making a black metal album and the story behind it resulted in a pretty exhilarating black metal album. And honestly, one of my favorite metal albums of the year. It's like 50 minutes or so and has like 5 songs. But basically every single song on this album slaps. And even the synths are great all over this album. And I would put it in the A tier. Oh god. Oh god. You guys probably don't even know what this album is. Third Secret is a comeback album, a secret comeback album even, from members of Nirvana and Soundgarden, and a bunch of other obscure bands. And it features some female vocals and a bunch of kooky instrumentals, and it's pretty corny. I heard it very early this year, around April, I think, but I still remember how odd it was. It's like a bunch of grunge songs in 2022 with a bunch of people that don't really know what they're doing. It's not horrendous. It's okay, but it's not good or bad. It's just mind-boggling, and that's the end of it.
Becomes so sick of now things that we and I never before thought I would. I choose me, can't hide. Oh, say goodbye.
I will put it in the C tier. Yeah. Oh no, Jack Harlow's Come Home, the Kids Miss You was bad. He phoned it in on this album so hard that even though the instrumentals were okay and the production was decent, he ruined the album himself. And the features were basically useless because Jack Harlow wasn't entertaining on like 90% of this album. There were like a couple good songs, but the rest of them were completely garbage and throwaway. And there are like 15 songs. It's bad. Don't listen to it. It's a waste of time, and I would put it in the D tier. The new Sidewalks and Skeletons album is a bit ethereal, a bit edgy, a bit electronic, but also it's pretty good. They have a grasp of what makes a great song, a great adventure, and I would say this is a pretty decent album that I would put in the B tier. A good Witch House album for sure. I still don't know how to delete this Superorganism album, so I'm just gonna put it here and forget about it. And the new Ashen Spire record is great. It's alternative metal that has post-rock fingerprints all over it, and it's a really great experience overall. It might be a bit underproduced and sound a bit too gray, but the performances on this album are really solid, and the whole album just flies by, and it's terrific from front to back. And I would put it it's kind of bordering on the A tier, but I would put it in the S tier because it is one of the best albums of the year, and you should hear it whenever you feel like it, I guess. Okay, alright. This new Autopsy album is great. It's death metal, doom metal, whatever you want to call it, loud rock. This album is such a great ride, man. The first few songs and really the album as a whole just gripped me and took me on a fucking journey. It was really grimy, but also really grand at the same time. It's fantastic. It's fantastic and pretty surprising because Autopsy has been around for like 30 years. And I don't know if they are the exact same guys as the ones who started the band, because after 30 years. There most likely were some group changes and whatnot. But this new studio album has really proved that they can still kick ass for like 10 tracks or so. And I would recommend the hell out of it, and I would put it in the A tier. It's a great thrilling ride that gets a bit samey at points, but is really great from front to back that you should definitely hear at some point. Speaking of great albums, this new Smino album is really soulful, really well produced, has some great tunes on it. I haven't heard any Smino albums before it, but apparently it's his best album, and I can see that because I loved it as well, and I would put it in the A tier. This next few are doozies, as I didn't really care for the new Brockhampton albums. They were really thrown together, really not that well produced, and sorta disappointing because they apparently will be their last albums ever. And they somehow both sound worse than what I've heard from Roadrunner last year. The Family is a bit better than TM, but I wouldn't say both are good, really. They have some great songs on it, especially The Family with Boy Band and Big Pussy. I don't think there are that many great songs on TM though. I would put The Family in C tier and TM in D tier. It borders on being C tier, but upon returning to it a month later, I didn't give like a single song on it, like anything above a 7 out of 10. And I did a few with The Family, so it's a bit better, but there's too much autotune and throwaway performances on TM. 7. Speaking of bad production, the new Jakey album is pretty bad. I heard his SoundCloud singles, I guess, from his earlier years a few days ago, and this album is about as good as those. And apparently it took him like a year to make this album. I guess that means he really was passionate about it, but it was really overproduced. And if you remember, he put out the music video and the song Pine Barrens like almost exactly a year ago, and it featured some sample of, I don't know, a video of a bunch of girls screaming or something. If that sample wasn't like already just okay to you, get ready to hear it on like 4 more songs on this album, because there are 8 songs on this album and about half of them feature that one sample that barely anyone knows now. Also, Jakey as a performer isn't really that great, and he has like a bunch of struggle bars all over this album that aren't that good. And yeah, this album was pretty hard to sit through, and I guess there's some potential in it, but I don't think I will come back to this album really ever. It's just ugh. And I'll give it the D tier. Okay, the new 100 Gigs EP is a bit hyped up, just a little bit, kind of. It features 3 songs, and one of them features Skrillex, so that's cool. The song Big Man actually is pretty noisy and entertaining and exciting, but the next two are kind of mellow cuts that just kind of sound like 100 cakes selling themselves short. Selling themselves short. I would have loved to see the singles they released this year to be on this EP, but I guess they will be exclusively on their next album that will release in a few months. That fans have been waiting since the first one. I think those singles would have made this EP a bit more entertaining for me, but for now I don't hate it really. But I'm not really in love with it at all either. And I would put it in the C tier. Cicada, Hiking Lamp. This is a Greek band that somehow ended up on one of my Discover Weeklies, and I heard it, and I think it's pretty great. It's a psychedelic rock album with some nods to heavy psych, and this album really pulled me in. The best songs on this album are really something to behold, like Forest and the closing track, but the rest are kind of okay in comparison to the best songs here. I wouldn't say it's one of the most standout albums of the year, but I would say it's kind of underrated, so it kind of borders on being A tier for me, but for now I would put it in the B tier. You should hear it, I recommend it. It's not top tier, but it is great. The new Cowboys, whatever, these guys, Celebrity Therapist album is pretty manic. It's pretty energetic, and it's one of the it's honestly one of the craziest math rock and sasscore albums I've ever. They really did make a splash this year with this album, and I can see why, because for the most part it's really noisy, it's really manic, and it's really entertaining, and it goes places for sure. I didn't love every second of it, but I loved like 70% of it, to be honest. And I would put it in the B tier. King Gizzard released quite a few albums this year. I think it's like 4 overall, and I heard 2 of them. The first one of which is Ice, Death, Planets, Lungs, Mushroom, and Lava. The second of which was Laminated Denim, and I liked both of them. Though I did like Laminated Denim because for one it was shorter, and for two the band structured these songs in a way that was really hypnotizing and really compact, because Laminated Denim is only 2 songs that are exactly 15 minutes long. Ice Death Planet's album is like an hour long, and it's all jammy funk rock songs that are pretty great, but didn't really need to be an hour long. I would recommend both of them, but I would put Ice Death Planets in B tier and put Laminated Denim in
A tier.
yeah. The new Charlie XCX album was mediocre. I'm sorry, but this new direction for her is really unentertaining. I haven't heard How I'm Feeling Now yet, but I have heard Charlie, and it is one of the best pop albums ever made. She really brought a personality and the best production ever on that album, but sadly on this new one she just kind of meanders around and presents some tunes that I think are fine, but not really memorable, and like a few good songs overall. Again, it's not bad, but it's just whatever. It's just whatever. I would put it in the C tier. The Rina Sawayama collaboration should have been a bit more entertaining. Speaking of which, I haven't heard Rina's new album, but I have heard some mixed opinions about that one. The new Artificial Brain album is pretty cool. It's what is it's like doom metal, technical death metal. It's death metal, and it knows it. The band really has some balls on this album, and you know, it's pretty conceptual as well, as the songs kind of progress some narrative that I don't exactly understand, but it's pretty cinematic and it's pretty memorable overall. Though I wish the vocals were a bit better, and I do wish the production was a bit better, as these songs kind of bleed into each other, and the vocals don't have much presence. But it's really, really great, and I would recommend it at least for one listen. And I would put it in B tier. It borders on being A tier, but my memories of it aren't that great to put it in A tier. The new Ken Mode album is pretty good. And if you don't know, Ken Mode started out as like a noise rock and sludge metal band. I only heard Success from their earlier stuff, and it was one of the best albums I've ever heard. And I haven't heard Loved yet, which is apparently their most well-known album, which is cool. And now it's time for a new album called Null, and it's a no wave album. It's quite a jump from making noise rock combined with sludge metal, but it has been 7 years since Success, and I would say Kenmo the do embody the spirit of no wave in a great way on this album, with some really heavy and long songs that really do leave an impact. Its main issue, though, is that it's not written that well. And because of that, this album kind of goes nowhere and doesn't have as much of an impact as it could have had. I still would recommend it. The performances are really savage, but I wish the writing was better. Yeah. BT. Alright, time for more loud rock music. The new Foxtails album is great. I haven't heard it since it came out, but from what I remember, the tunes on this album were really, really sticky. The performances were terrific. I don't remember that much about it because I heard it like 6-7 months ago, but I would still recommend it because it seems to be one of the most well-known screamo albums of the year, and I respect it for being pretty solid on that front. And I would give it the A tier. I don't think I explained why this Foxtails album was as great as I thought. I just listened to all of it just now, and it kind of grew off of me, but I would still put it in A tier, because I truly believe it's one of the best rock albums of the year. The strings are consistently great, the vocals have a lot of punch and character to them. The female vocals are great. The scope of the instrumentation and the production is actually quite amazing and stunning. So while the core of the album might be a bit too empty at points, it's still a spectacular album that I would recommend a lot. Now it kind of borders on being B tier for me, but I still would put it in A tier because I would recommend to all of you to listen to this album because it is ear candy at points. It's seriously a treat to listen to the strings on this album. A tier. Speaking of albums that came out early this year, the new FKA Twigs mixtape. I heard this album like yesterday, and it is really creative and really catchy. The songs just fly by, and there are a ton of highlights on this album. It's one of the best and most creative albums of the year, though it is funny that it came out in the first month of it. And I would give it the A tier as well. This new Björk album was okay. You can see my last video as of the recording of this new one, that I didn't really care for it that much. There are some great songs on it for sure, but a lot of the time I just felt like Björk was throwing random ideas into it and with mixed results. The second single, Of You, really had no progression to it, and I was mixed just as much on nearly half of the album. Also, the interludes were just random noises, straight up, and I didn't care for them either. Atopos and Centres and the last few songs are great, I would recommend them, but I didn't really care for the rest of the album at all, and I hope Björk comes back from it in a new way that is a bit more exciting and a bit more well put together, because this album wasn't really that for me, and I would put it in the C tier. The new Arctic Monkeys album was annoying. It was a really pretentious and jazzy lounge sound. Didn't really do it any favors. And I appreciate that they go for an older style of music and all that, but did it result in a quality album? Not really. And I haven't heard their last album, Tranquility Base and Hotel. I think that's what it's called. But I remember it being pretty divisive. The car is like a bit of a seductive, jazzy journey that I didn't care for at all. Yeah, I don't know what's there more to say. Alex Turner has no vocal chops when it comes to this style of music, and I don't know. It's whatever, and bad, kind of. And I would put it in the D tier. The new Taylor Swift album is Reputation 2. Everyone agrees on that, but I haven't heard it for a second time yet, so it might be a masterpiece, but from what I remember, there were a lot of songs that were really moody, but kind of okay, and that's it. And a bunch of pretty good songs this is a strange album because there were a bunch of controversies around it, but I can't remember that much about it after hearing it once. But even if I gave it like a 6 out of 10 now, I still would put it in the C tier. So it might grow on me, it might grow off of me, but I am going to give it the C tier as well. This Zeal and Ardor album I heard yesterday, they're self-titled by the way, is pretty bad. The vocals, the production, the song topics were all just mind-boggling and not in the best of ways. It was also kind of melodic in a really corny way. Yeah, I wouldn't recommend it at all. It's just not that great of a self-titled album because I have heard Devil is Fine and I like that album quite a bit. Gave it like a 7 out of 10. But this album was like even worse than that. It had like next to no direction, both sonically and topically. What they presented here was almost unlistenable. And I would put it in the D tier. When I was walking my dog today, right before shooting this video, I heard the new Soul Glow album that came out very early this year, and I can confirm it's the hardcore punk album of the year. It's so out there, so manic, and so expressive that it kind of threw me off. If you want straight up insanity, I would recommend it right away. But you know, I wouldn't say it's one of my best albums of the year. I would still say it's super solid though. And I would put it in the A tier. As I said in the beginning of this video, I didn't really care for the self-titled Wet Leg album. I thought there were some great songs on it, but I thought some songs were mediocre and kind of ruined the album. So I would put it in C tier. Also, I forgot to mention, I heard Lil Sim's new album that came out about a week ago, yesterday, and it's pretty good. It's obviously not one of her best as of late, but I would say it's a great album on its own with a bunch of loose songs and passionate verses that I like quite a bit. It's not super great as a whole, but it is pretty great overall. Yeah, and I would put it in the B tier. Okay, so I just heard the last Ghost album called Impera, and I can confirm it has next to no thrilling songs, and I didn't really enjoy it all that much. I'm going to put it in the C tier. Some of the song concepts were pretty fun, but the instrumentals were pretty soulless, and the vocals were a bit too corny, in my opinion. So yeah, about a 5 out of 10 or a 6 out of 10 on that album. Okay, the next albums I heard were the new Black Dresses album and the new Beyoncé album, and I like both of them about the same. Black Dresses are a post-industrial band, and this new album of theirs is about 20 minutes or so long, and yeah, it presented a bunch of abrasive, punky, sour songs that I liked quite a bit. Not all of them. Some of them I would kind of shrug to, but some of them I did heart on Spotify and would return to regularly. Yeah, I haven't heard the one from 2021, but I have heard Peaceful as Hell, and this album isn't really as good as Peaceful as Hell, but it is still pretty good, and I would put it in the B tier. Now the Beyoncé album is much longer, like over an hour long. The production is really solid. Beyonce's personality and her flows are really in your face and really solid as well. But it being 16 songs long and kind of up its own ass didn't really make me love it, but I still liked it a lot. I get the hype behind it, and I would recommend it because it does live up to the hype. Yeah, and I would also put it in the B tier. So this album is in the house and dance pop genre. Forgot to mention that. This fucking forgot about this new Future album called "I Never Liked You." I never liked you or whatever. It's just Future by numbers. I have nothing to say about it. He sounds like he's putting more effort than some of his most throwaway singles, so that's cool. But there are like next to no good tunes or song topics here. There are a few highlights, like the song of Kanye West, but for the most part, it's one of the most mid albums I've heard all year, and I'm going to put it in the C tier. Like, I've heard it a few months ago and I completely forgot to put it in this tier or this template, but here it is. It's in the C tier. Here we go. Okay, so the next album I heard was the first Belly Woods album this year called Ethiops. This album is absolutely fantastic. I heard it for the first time today, and I might love it even more the next time I hear it, because the verses on this album are so packed with meaning that even at the first listen I was overwhelmed, and trying to understand all of them, it will probably be easier the next time around. Beyond that, I loved them all. The features were great. I loved the LP feature, I loved the Elucid feature, I loved the Despot feature. Pretty much all collabs on this album were great. And the beats were pretty minimal, but worked for this haunted, dark feeling of the album that I loved for sure. It could have been a bit more exciting in places, but I think you can overlook that and just see this album as like a piece of poetry, because it's like not that fast, and Billy Woods is rapping pretty slowly, which borders on being spoken word. So it's kind of cinematic in a way, so you can enjoy it for that, I guess. That was pretty incoherent, sorry. This album is great. Absolutely putting it in A tier. It's great. This Will of the People Muse album is one of the worst things I've heard all year as well. They think they can make metal music but pop rock at the same time, but they just can't. And on top of that, they think they are making political songs as well, but one, they are vague as fuck, and two, they sound corny as shit. and it's 10 songs, but like one of them is good and the rest of them are just complete garbage. I wouldn't recommend this album at all. Uh, it's easily one of the worst rock albums ever made, and one of the worst albums of this year. And I'm going to put it in the F tier. Another album I forgot to add to the tier list template is the Mars Volta's self-titled, and this album takes more of an art pop direction and Latin pop direction than their most iconic and earlier stuff. But I think this album works in its own way. It's pretty colorful, it's pretty soulful, kind of, and I would say it's pretty fun, but it's pretty flawed because this album is pretty flat and it's not recorded that well since it was recorded in a house and not in a professional studio. But I would recommend it if you want to hear this classic rock act, do themselves justice after a 10-year hiatus and stuff. But for me, it was just okay because there were a lot of songs I just didn't care for, and I would give it about a 6 out of 10 and put it in the C tier. Okay, so I heard Jid's The Forever Story a few days ago, and I can confirm it's the best rap album of the year. The choruses, the instrumentals, the flows, the song topics, it all comes together into a cohesive and a near flawless album. Jid, while he does still have some Kendrick influence in his voice and I guess artistic choices, 15 songs that are this enjoyable isn't a small feat. And honestly, I haven't heard a single album this year that came close to being as great as this album. Even Kendrick's new album isn't as good. So yeah, I'm going to put this album in the S tier, and I would recommend to all of you watching to listen to it as well. The features are also all great. Look at how many songs I heard it on this album. That is quite the ratio there. Yeah. Also the singles were amazing. Forgot to mention that. Okay, so I just heard this Material Girl album and I'd say it was pretty good. It's a mix of abstract hip hop and a few shades of electronic music and even jazz rap. If that's your thing, go check it out. But for me, I'd say it was just alright. It's about an hour long, and there are like 5 songs from 13 songs I did kind of like. But the rest was just there and didn't really add much, in my opinion. I guess the influences, I guess the musical influences and the production were pretty good. The vocals could be a bit more unique, in my opinion, and stand out, but they weren't. Would I recommend this album to you? I'd say check it out. It's not very great. I wouldn't give it the best score in the world, and I wouldn't put it in my top 30 of this year, but I'd say it has some pretty unique ideas and it has a creative way of going about them. But there were a lot of songs that didn't really hit me at all, and it was kind of a passive experience. for the most part, which I can appreciate, but this was, going for something a bit conceptual, and it didn't really pan out in my opinion. I'm kind of split on this album, because there are a lot of great things about it, at least for a few tracks, but there are also songs that I just would give like a 5 out of 10 to. So for me, this album is bordering on C and B tier. Um, I would give it B minus. There we go. I would put it in the B minus tier. Yeah, it's okay. So I just heard A Light for Attracting Attention, and I must. And I must say it was pretty good. I didn't hear it when it was released because I thought the singles were pretty mild, but now I just got back from a walk with my dog and I heard it on that walk, and I must say it was pretty good. It's not really as good as Radiohead's a moon-shaped pool, but I don't think anyone was expecting it to be as good. Tom and the Smile do a good job at creating some great tunes with this new instrumental palette. There are a few dots that I didn't care for, but for the most part, this album had a lot of great tracks, a few of which I actually did hard on Spotify, and I would recommend this album overall, even if it's, kind of a novelty album, because Tom York being attached to any band after 6 years of no Radiohead is gonna attach um, some sort of attention to it. And yeah, even though this album was pretty great, I don't think the quality of it really mattered, because people were gonna rate it very high scores no matter what, because Tom, even though he still is a great singer and a great songwriter, him making basically a whole lot of classics with Radiohead can translate into people loving anything he does at this point. This album is pretty quirky and pretty jammy, which doesn't really translate to being entertaining for everyone, I think. But anyway, this album was pretty good. I'm gonna stop repeating myself now. I'm putting it in the B tier. And I guess that's it. Though, there was this guy. Yeah, Shiki was pretty good. I would put it in A tier if I were to re-listen to it. So, imagine it being in A tier. So this Andrew Verdon guy, I met him by the Brad Taste Music Discord. Bradcord is what it's called, and he makes a lot of albums. I've heard a few of them. Here's what I rated all of them, and I would say he makes some strange songs for sure. Not all of them stick with me, but I would say he has a style that I appreciate, and some songs under his belt I actually do enjoy quite a lot. So yeah, Cute Sodomite Girl 7 was pretty good. Untitled for Project from Andy was much more blissful, but I liked it about the same. Cabinet was pretty ambient, and it felt a bit nondescript, but I did like it overall. And whatever this title is, I didn't really care for, because it was like a bunch of interviews uh, made into lo-fi music, I guess. I don't even remember. It's like a bunch of interviews with lo-fi recording and a bunch of beats later on. He says he worked on it really hard or something, but I don't think I did. I don't think he did. Yeah, check out his music. It's pretty good. Also, Correlate, I met him on Bradcord as well. He made this Weasel album, and it's one of the best albums of the year, is what I thought when I heard it. It's like a bunch of industrial and noise rock songs, but produced so well that it's like almost appealing to a pop audience. I might be saying nonsense, but this album is very well produced and I enjoyed it a lot. My score might drop down a bit because I didn't pay that much attention to some of it, because it was really abrasive at points. If you want to hear a really great Bandcamp release that has some strangeness to it and a lot of great things going for it, I would recommend this Last Exit from the Door album from Coil 8. Also, fuck you, dude. Stop calling me Funko Pop. It's Funky Blood, dumbass. If you end up watching this, go fuck yourself. So yeah, that's it. If you want to hear some of the best albums of the year, in my opinion, you should hear the albums in S tier. If you want some really great albums of the year, from this year, you should hear the albums in A tier and kind of in B tier. And if, I don't know, C tier is for the albums I didn't care for in either direction. I didn't hate them, I didn't love them. That's the compilation of them. And if you want to hear some intolerable albums that aren't the worst thing ever, I guess hear the D tier. And if you want to hear the worst things ever, you should hear the F tier. And that's it. At the start of this year, I had around 15 subscribers and like 20 or so videos that I made kind of sloppily. And now I have like even more videos, but 5 times more subs and a video with 1,000 views. That's crazy. My first kind of year, I started in late 2021. I got like 30-40 views on most of my videos, and they didn't really go anywhere. But then in 2022, when I started doing reaction videos, I got like hundreds of views, and then by the end of the year I was getting like 300 and 1,000 views on one video. That was crazy. It was great. It was great. So I hope going into 2023 that I will make more videos that garner some attention and you guys will like. There might be some changes in what I do in my videos. and what I make my videos about. But I hope that I will be able to make as many great reaction videos as possible. And maybe I will make a tier list of 2023 albums a year from now. So yeah, thanks for this great year, and I hope I will achieve even more in the next one. Happy New Year, Merry Christmas, or Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, and that's it. I'm Funky Blood. Have a nice life. What?
Homogenic.
Reaction video coming soon. I promise. Video over.